Hi everyone, I'm Sacha Connor from Virtual Work Insider. Today we're going to be talking about creating a leader preparation plan. So a plan that you as a leader of your organization can use to help as you are transitioning into this rapid remote work situation. So I want you to walk away from today's session being ready. Feeling ready by knowing the 4 must-have skill areas to be a successful virtual leader, and being able to think about what principles and norms to put into place to help your team during this transition. I want you to be flexible as well, because things are changing on a daily basis. So whatever plans you're putting into place right now most likely are going to have to change on a daily or weekly basis as new information comes up. And then lastly, I want you to be change agents. I want you to be able to go back into your organizations and be able to see where your organization or your team might need help with making this transition and making those changes accordingly. So we're going to talk about 6 different areas today to help with your rapid remote transition. So that ranges from talking about some mindsets and some norms, how to put activity creativity into effect. We're going to look at identifying some skill gaps. I'm going to show you a tool on using a great agenda tool called the 5 Ps, and then how to stay top of mind and influence across distance using seeds and triggers. So first, let's start off with this. This is not usual remote work, what's happening right now. Usual remote work is a very controlled environment where it's seamless to the team or the organization that you're working with. So in my situation here in my home office in Philadelphia, on the eastern coast of the United States, I usually have 2 locked doors between me and my kids, and always there, is some sort of babysitter or my kids are at school when I'm trying to work. But what we need to talk about is the elephant in our virtual room, which is that this is not normal. We are having to juggle work and life like never before. This is extreme work-life integration that's happening right now. So we, might have kids at various ages that need our time and our attention. Luckily my kids are old enough to understand some boundaries, but if you have toddlers or babies in the home, you need to be able to react to their needs. You might have elderly, parents or family members or friends that you're also taking care of, or you might unfortunately have people who are starting to get sick right now that need your time and attention. So we really need to think as leaders of organizations about how can we be empathetic to the situation that's going on around our remote workers right now, because we need to be thinking about both the productivity and the people right now. So just really quickly, a little bit of background on myself so you have some context for what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So I'm actually a marketer by trade. So I spent 18 years working in different organizations. So on the inside of these organizations, both from an marketing agency perspective, but also from the client side. So I spent 14 years at the Clorox company, which is a large consumer packaged goods company, about a $5 billion company located in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area of the United States. And of those 14 years working for Clorox, 8 of them I did fully remotely from my home office here in Philadelphia. So about 18 months ago, I left Clorox to start my own virtual leadership consulting and training business, which is coming in really handy right now as many of you are experiencing that move to remote or virtual work. So just a little bit about my remote work story was that I ended up leading large distributed teams for those 8 years from my Philadelphia home office, but the majority of my team was located in the Bay Area. So this is a picture of one of the last teams that I led. It was a team responsible for $250 million worth of sales, and I was the first fully remote member of the leadership team that overlooked the $1 billion cleaning division for the company. So as you can see here in this picture, before the COVID-19 office shutdowns, teams looked a lot like this, where you have a group that was co-located in one location and then a couple other people who might be at satellite offices or fully remote. So, here's an example of what a U.S. company, what their virtual work landscape could look like. Again, many companies, the majority of companies are not fully remote up until, what's been happening with COVID. But what is an ongoing opportunity before COVID and then after, whenever we return to whatever that normal is going to look like, is to learn how to work across distance, to be able to learn to work across these different office sites, to work with our fully remote employees, and then even to work with clients and outside customers. So an example of this is what I call the spectrum of remoteness. So on one side, you have companies or teams that might be all co-located, and on the other side, you have companies and teams that are fully remote. So the frogs, my friend Greg Kaplan from Remote Year uses that terminology, frog, fully remote organizations. And usually we're all kind of in this red box. The majority of companies are in this geographically distributed or hybrid or virtual team. And we have to think about, working with clients in terms of also those clients being a virtual relationship. So right now, if you're a service organization, you're probably scrambling to figure out how do you work in a virtual way with your clients, your customers. And we're all right now finding ourselves in that frog box right now. But whenever we go back to whatever normal is, many of us might move back into that red box in the middle. So a couple of things that I want you to be aware of in terms of concepts when you're working both in that red box, in the hybrid or virtual teams, and then in the frog box, is something called distance bias. So the Neuroleadership Institute came up with an unconscious bias model called the SEEDS model. And it's an acronym. The D in SEEDS stands for distance bias. And it is our brain's natural tendency to put more importance on the people and the things that are closer to us than those that are further away. So I'm going to say that again. Our brain's natural tendency to put more importance on the people and things that are closer to us than those that are further away. So this might, make you start thinking about, wow, I remember being left out of this communication or this event with my company. And, a lot of it is because of this unconscious bias model. So once you're aware of that, then you can make the rest of your organization aware of this bias and start thinking about how to put plans in to mitigate the bias. Another concept I want you to think about is what I call the dangerous delay mindset. So this is something specifically I'm seeing happening in this particular situation with the COVID-19 office shutdowns. A lot of organizations know how to get work done together when they're in person. And once they now have become distributed, I've seen the tendency to actually delay or put off some of the work. And it's because the groups of people and the team members don't know how to actually transition that work from typical in-person work to online work. So they're saying, okay, well, we'll just push this out until we all get back together in person and we can do it then. And why that's dangerous is because we don't know how long this is going to last. Some companies I'm seeing are starting to prepare that this could be a longer term thing and putting some structure and plans in place. Or other companies are taking the approach of just 2 weeks at a time, which that can be really dangerous because you just are continuously band-aiding. So what I think you should be doing is moving from this delay mindset into a transition mindset. So you're going to have a bit of a dip in productivity at first until you all figure out how to facilitate and execute those things that you are used to doing in person. So one way to do that is by just starting to map out for your team or your organization, what things do you want to transition, what things are mission critical, and how do you want to transition them? What are the new facilitation methods you need to use? What are the new software tools you need to use? And then what do you want to delay? Because you should be delaying a couple of things, because you should be delaying the lowest priority work right now. Because as we said before, people are juggling so much with work and life right now, we can't distract them with the low priority work. So make a list of the things you want to delay and until when are you going to delay them. And I want to make a note on water cooler moments. So these are really important for you to be able to replicate and duplicate in a very intentional way in your new virtual work environment. So when you're in an office building, those moments of running into each other at the water cooler, at the coffee maker, or in the elevator, Those are moments when pleasantries are exchanged, but there are also moments of influence. So they are really important moments for you to be able to replicate in a virtual environment. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that in a minute. I want to introduce you to my virtual leadership success framework. So these are the 4 must-have skill areas in order to be an effective virtual leader. And the reason I created this is because often companies will come to me and say, can you recommend a tech tool to use for this specific situation that I'm in? And I ask people to actually back up and think about more than just the technology tools, because the tools are important and they're foundational, but these other 4 boxes are as important, if not more important, than the technology tools. And so that includes expectation setting, relationship building and culture, and some very specific virtual skills training. So within the rest of my time with you today, I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these boxes and things that you could start putting into place with your team. So first, let's start off with expectation setting, and it actually brings in a little bit on this technology tool front. This is the most important thing that you as a leader can be doing with your organization, is to take a step back and think about what principles and communication norms you want to put in place for your whole team to use as they are trying to figure out how to work together remotely. So an example of this would be something like an availability norm. You might want to set some core meeting hours. So for example, I had one client who decided that they wanted to set a norm of no meetings before 9 a.m. Eastern. So that's the time zone that the majority of their team worked within. And that was to enable parents to be able to set their kids up with the homeschooling and things that they needed to get into place. And then aiming for meetings to end by 3 p.m. Again, to allow the employees to know what was expected of them in terms of being able to be on synchronous video calls or phone calls, but then give them that flexibility to be available for their families. This didn't mean that work ended at 3 p.m., but it meant that it gave some flexibility for the employees to work on their own time around their schedules. So yours might look different than this if you're working with teams that are across different time zones across the world, but the idea here is to actually take a step back to create these norms for yourselves and your teams. Also, so when it comes to communication norms and technology tools, I'm a huge proponent of using video. A video-first culture helps with relationship building and context setting, because so much of our communication is more than just the words that we say. And so I suggest moving to video if at all possible. And that's because you can pick up these contextual clues of what's going on. You may still be working with some people somewhere who haven't been locked down yet, who might be in a room together. You also have the ability to, pick up context clues about the person that you're talking to, even if they're working from home. What a great opportunity for you to each share something now via video personally about yourselves from the comfort of your own home that you might not have been able to do otherwise. But if you're going to move to video, and if you haven't already, which many of my clients actually had not moved to video yet, you want to talk about what the expectations are when you're on video. So in a normal remote work situation, I would have said no disruptions. It has to be a very controlled environment, quiet environment. Kids can't bust through and come into a meeting. But this is different. And so the expectations should be that it's different, and that, yes, try to limit some disruptions, but life's going to happen. It's okay. As a leader, say it's okay if your kid comes into the call, or if you have to have a baby on your lap, or if there's a barking dog. Another expectation you might want to say is, what is the dress code for being on video? So believe it or not, lots of people ask about this. What should I wear on video? And it's up to you as a leader to determine where the boundaries are for your company culture. So, I would say you could lean on the side of business comfort, but maybe not namaste in bed comfort, even though I've heard of some people showing up in pajamas and robes. Maybe if you're having a pajama party as a team kind of culture building event, but other than that, I would stay away from the robe and the pajamas. So think about what new rituals you want to create So I'm hearing a lot about emails going through the roof right now. So many emails coming back and forth with people because that's how they're replacing that in-person communication. So a couple ways in which you can reduce that email is just to really sit down with your team and think about, how do we want to actually communicate these different types of buckets of information? So from documenting a decision in that FYI, which you might say is good for email or chat, to how are we going to make complex decisions and resolve conflict, which we know email would not be a good thing to do. So think about, what norms you can put in place to use different technology tools to do the different types of communication that your team usually does. So let's move into the yellow box now, which is relationship building and culture building. So if this was a 2-week situation where everybody was working remotely, I wouldn't even bother talking about this, because you would kind of go back to your own kind of relationship building and culture building norms within your offices. But because we don't know how long this is going to be, and if you have offices that are spread across the US or the globe, even after COVID passes, these are good tips to think about. So we know that remote workers already struggle with a lot more loneliness than in-office workers. And we know that because of all of the health concerns around COVID, anxiety is really high too. So that needs to be combated with communication and connection. So thinking about creating a connection plan. So what can you do to bring people together to build that trust and continue to drive the trust and the culture and the relationships? And this is going to take some activity creativity, where you take your usual offline activities and bring them online. So it could be as simple as a virtual coffee chat or a virtual happy hour, but you can be a little bit more creative. I was even part of a virtual 5K several months ago, so a virtual road race where we came together at the beginning of the race, went out and ran, and came back and talked about how fast we did it. But you can also think about things like a virtual dance party. So this is a picture of my team that we did this was a while back now, but we had music playing and one person did a dance move, and then the next person took that dance move and added their own dance move, and then we went around the horn. And some of you might be saying, like, I am never going to do a virtual dance party with my team. But you can think about how, you might create a unique idea that fits your personality. So this is just an example of, one of many things that you could come up with. And I'm not going to lie, it actually can be kind of awkward at first to do these kinds of things virtually, but pretty soon, everybody gets used to it and is having fun and is enjoying it. And then lastly, this pink box, virtual skills training. So this includes first thinking about what are those virtual skills that are most important to successfully working across distance. So these are 10 skill areas that I usually assess when I'm working with a client. If you want, you can go to my website, virtualworkinsider.com, and on the homepage there is a new banner that says tips and tools. That'll take you to a free downloadable PDF that includes these skill areas that you could use with yourself and your team. And the benefit of doing this is that you can then see what opportunities there are to enhance some of those skill areas for your team, either by using an external trainer or consultant, or you can see who on your team is already an expert in some of these areas that actually could lead some of the training internally for you. So this is just a skills assessment. One of the key skills in order to be leading a virtual team right now is, how do you effectively facilitate and lead a good virtual meeting? And virtual meetings are different than, those in-person huddles that many of us were used to. And right now, none of us has the time to sit in a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour meeting and waste time not knowing, why are we there? What are we trying to get out of this situation? So many of us have probably been in those really, frustrating meetings. So this is my plea to all of you meeting leaders out there, is to really think through what you're trying to achieve with a meeting before you call the meeting. And you might even decide that a meeting's not needed at all, that there's another way to actually get to the outcome that you're looking for. So one key tool for that is my 5Ps agenda. And again, you can download this off of my website in case you don't catch it all right now. But this is being really deliberate ahead of time about what's the purpose of the meeting, which usually everybody kind of knows what the high level purpose is. But then getting really concrete on the process. What's the process by which you're going to facilitate the meeting to make it really effective and efficient with people's time? What is the product? This is the part where people usually don't get this detailed, and it's a miss, because if you get really detailed on the product, what are the very specific things we want to walk out of this meeting with? So for example, we want to leave the meeting with 3 follow-up steps to complete this project that we're on, or we want to leave with a completed timeline on this project. Really specific. It will help you with determining, how long the meeting needs to be and who needs to be there. Then the pre-work part. Try to figure out what can be done ahead of time to, again, make that synchronous time with each other as short as possible. And then the people. Really think about who is the smallest group of the right people to get this work done. You want to avoid having tourists in this meeting. You don't want to bring people in who could be using their time better elsewhere. So think about the smallest group of the right people. So another key skill area is how to influence across distance. This is huge. How do you stay top of mind, make sure that your influence, your ideas are felt across that distance? And this usually is a topic that I do an entire 90-minute workshop on. So we're not going to have time to go into that today, but it usually involves steps like mapping out your stakeholders, thinking about why you need to influence them, and getting then really specific on the how, and how are you going to influence them across distance. But I want to leave you with one tip today, and that is thinking about how do you plant seeds or create triggers to stay top of mind. So one way in which to do that is really simple. It's an open-ended good morning, instant message, text, WhatsApp message. And so the idea here is the morning is a great aperture because it gives you that ability to plant a seed early in the day about you. So you will be more likely for that other person to think of you later in the day when something comes up in terms of maybe assigning you some new work or letting you know about some information that was shared out at the company level. So that morning aperture is really important. And also it's a trigger. So if they see your name pop up, it might trigger them to say, oh yeah, I've been meaning to tell Sacha that, right? I heard this through an email or through a chat yesterday. I needed to tell you about this. So think about those deliberate ways that you can plant seeds and create triggers. So we've just quickly gone through those 6 areas that I promised at the upfront of the session here. And I hope you feel like you are ready to help with that transition to remote work with your teams. I hope you can stay flexible. I hope you feel like you can go back and be change agents. So feel free to contact me at any of these, at my email address or on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I offer different services such as bringing different virtual skills training workshops to teams, from how to lead an effective meeting to how to influence across distance. And also I've been doing a lot of facilitated workshops with leaders to help them create their very unique preparation plan for their company during this very unique time of rapid remote work. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you. Stay well.
Hi, Sacha.
Hello, Shannon, and hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. Looking forward to getting into the Q&A session with you all. All right, great. So I see here the top question: what are the biggest concerns you see from newly remote managers, and how do you address them? So yes, this is a huge thing right now in terms of how to have a successful remote reporting relationship. So I think you have to look at it both from the manager's side of things and also the direct report, because many people have not had that experience of working with a remote manager or working with a remote direct report. So I think that the first thing that you can do is to always, it's going back to this framework that I showed to you in the session, which is covering off these kind of 4 boxes. And the most important thing when you're in a remote reporting relationship is that blue box, expectation setting. So having some conversations around, what are our communication norms going to be? How are we going to stay in touch? How are we going to communicate? What is the amount of information that needs to flow between the manager and the direct report, and how detailed should that information be? Because one of the concerns that does come up is micromanaging, right? So sometimes when you have that distance between you and the direct report, you start wondering, are they working? Are they working on the right things? And so to have those communication norms in place really helps. And the last thing I'll say about it is where I see issues with remote reporting relationships is being able to ask for help as a direct report, or as a manager know how to know if your person needs help. And so again, you have to talk about what are your kind of SOS signals or your signals for help across distance. Is that a text message? Is that a quick phone call? Is that through email? How do you make sure that your people are getting what they need? Because it's very hard to reach out across that distance and through the screen and through the technology to ask for the help that you need. So I'll move into the next question. How do you deal with exec leaders who think remote equals Zoom meetings only? Exactly, yes. So back to this framework again, everything always comes back to the framework, which is, it's not about the technology tools, it's actually about this entire framework here. So it's going back to, the leaders have to think about what are those virtual leadership principles that they want to put in place in terms of availability norms, communication norms, and then thinking through how are we going to continue to have a strong relationship as a team and as a company culture. And then helping with skills like influencing across distance, making sure those meetings are really effective. How do we manage people from a distance, right? So everything we've talked about here. So it's always about helping those executive leaders take a step back, and the technology tools just being a foundational tool to be able to stay connected, but putting these other three boxes here in place first. All right, next question. What do you think is the main area of focus for company leadership with growing mixed teams post-COVID? Yeah, this is the most interesting and fascinating perspective for me as we go post-COVID, because as I explained in the short video that you watched, prior to COVID, we were all working virtually in some aspect. We were working across satellite offices, we were working with some fully remote employees, and then we skipped all the way to this fully remote environment, where that fully remote environment, one of the positive things is that everyone is on an equal playing field right now, right? So we've got no groups of people that are co-located together. But as COVID passes, we are going to move into these strange hybrid teams that most of these organizations haven't ever worked in before. So they might have had a hybrid team before where they were working across several office sites, but now they're going to have new hybrid teams where they're going to have to work with some fully remote employees that are going to stay remote post-COVID, or a smaller group of people that's going to be co-located in a headquarters or an office site. And I think that the main thing that leaders are going to have to focus on is overcoming that distance bias that I told you about. So distance bias is at its peak when you are in those hybrid teams, when you have some group that's co-located and other people that are not with the co-located group. And so making sure that you're aware of the distance bias and putting plans in to mitigate it. And so some of the things I talked about how to mitigate that through the session today. All right, so what is the most common thing you're finding that people are getting wrong in this rapid remote time? So what I've been doing a couple of assessments with my clients to see how people are faring during the rapid remote time. And a couple of themes continuously come up. One is that emails and meetings are exploding. Too many emails, too many meetings, and people burning out because they're not able to keep up with it. And so again, it gets back to thinking through what are those new communication norms that you want to have. So putting some new rituals in place so that you don't have to have full days long of meetings all day. So it could mean putting some sort of scrum or a stand-up meeting in place in the mornings to help with that quick synchronous time where everybody can get themselves organized and know what they're working on for the week. And then putting in some other communication tools and methods instead of it just being all email. So that's one thing that I'm seeing is a problem. The second part is that people are saying they just can't disconnect from work. That work and life, there are no boundaries now because people are working from home. And so leaders need to understand that and help their teams not get to burnout by putting some principles again in place in terms of core meeting hours, understanding responsiveness principles. So for example, saying, just because I might be sending you an email at 10 o'clock at night because that's when I can fit the work in around my kids, I am not expecting you to respond to me at 10 o'clock at night. I'm expecting you to respond to me when you can fit it in around what you're juggling at home. So being really deliberate and intentional about that. And then also, I'm seeing the third thing that I'm seeing in these studies that I've been doing is around people feeling really disconnected from their teams. And so back to, we don't know how long this is going to last. So it's really important to put a deliberate connection plan in place to help people still feel like they're connected to their coworkers right now. What I'm seeing is leaders are getting this wrong and they're not thinking about that strategically and just saying, oh, we'll get back to that once it's past COVID. But really, you need to be putting those connection plans in place right now. So what are your thoughts on expanding of an already remote team? Pitfalls to avoid. I'm just reading this again. As already remote teams grow, maintaining team culture and fit will be critical. Yes, so if you already had a remote team in place, and I'm assuming that this is a question around teams that are already fully remote, my guess is that you already have some of these plans, principles, processes, skills in place, because usually you can't even start up as a remote team without having that in place. And so I think, making sure that you as the team gets bigger and bigger, continue to have really good communication plans around what your cultural norms are, what your mission is, what the values of the team are, making sure that people are learning about each other from a personal lens and a business lens. And, especially when you're bringing in new hires. So that's another thing that I'm seeing in terms of a particular challenge right now is that companies that thought they were bringing in new employees or interns. So we're getting to be the summer here in the US. And that's the time for internships to start. And usually internships are done in person. And so thinking about how you're going to onboard new people in this virtual environment is going to be a whole new process and skill that a lot of companies are going to have to figure out very, very, very quickly. Well, thank you for the note on the amazing presentation. I'm super excited that you thought that the content was valuable. I'm getting the sign from Shannon that I have 1 minute left. 5 tips for building synchronous culture, water cooler, what else? And what else? I think this is asking about how do we continue to do those water cooler moments. I think I mentioned to you kind of planting seeds and triggers as one thing to do there. But you can also consider to have some sort of office hours, or what I did with my team, something called Spark Time, where everybody was available at the same time. Twice a week for a 2-hour window. And so that allowed people to have these kind of intersections, even virtually, and this is actually synchronous what I'm talking about, to be able to bounce ideas off of each other. So I know we're about done. I will take a
a look at the rest of the questions I didn't get to today to see if there's anything else I can help you all with. You have my contact information. I'm going to put that back up on the stage. Would love to hear from you all. You have the link to my free downloadable resources as well. And feel free to reach out if you need any skills training workshops to come to your company. Anything from influencing across distance to leading good virtual meetings to how to successfully work with remote managers or direct reports.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation.